Hey, everybody. Happy Saturday. Today, we are talking about personal responsibility. And this started out as a rant because that's just where I'm at today. But as often happens, as I wrote out the description of this video and what we're going to be talking about, I reminded myself of the essential truth that it doesn't do any good to just be angry. It does no good to just be angry. And it certainly doesn't do any good to it certainly doesn't do any good to blame people who you think are doing things that are wrong. So what we're going to talk about is the essential equation, the formula that is required for activating real transformation, whether it's in your life or in your family or in our country. When you see injustice, when you see toxicity, when you see abuse, absolutely, it must be called out. It must be named. It must be held to account. And it is essential that we maintain a conscious awareness of the formula for transformation, which includes personal responsibility. In other words, stop blaming other people unless you're looking just as hard at your own role. Personal responsibility. Truth, so important. Absolutely nothing can change. Nobody can have a discussion. Transformation cannot occur if there isn't truth going on. The old adage, right? You can't change something until you first have accurately measured it. Personal responsibility, truth, contrition, which means actually being sorry when you've done wrong, or when someone who you're talking to or seeking to activate or to hold to justice recognizes that wrong has been done. There needs to be contrition, actual regret for the wrong that has been done. Contrition. The person who recognizes they have done wrong must truly be sorry for it. And then forgiveness. We must hold space for forgiveness in this equation. There is no role for transformation that amounts to exclusively whipping and punishing and holding accountable those who we deem to have committed wrongdoing. That is just as toxic and abusive as whatever these bad guys did in the first place. It cannot work. We who feel ourselves to be morally superior, who feel ourselves to be self-righteous, who feel ourselves to be on the side of right in the world, we must find the strength and the courage to express forgiveness, to hold open forgiveness to those who have wronged us. We absolutely must. We cannot simply lash and blame and seek vengeance on those who we think have wronged us. It doesn't work, first of all, and it is putting just as much darkness and wrongdoing out into the world as whatever the people did who we think were so awful. So I want to talk about a couple of examples to illustrate this. We're going to talk about a new project called The Redemption Project that Van Jones is getting ready to air on CNN. It's an 8-part series. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about a astounding new play called Cambodian Rock Band that has been playing all over the country, and it's finishing up its run here in Chicago tomorrow, May 12th. It's playing at the Victory Gardens Theater. So if you're in Chicago and you're free tonight or tomorrow, there's 2 performances left. Or go to another city, find out where it's being produced in another city and see it, because it's amazing. And hi, Aurora from Rio. That's amazing. Love that you're there. Thank you for joining. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about the podcast that I myself am gearing up to produce. And my podcast is called Solving Me Too in 7 Simple but Crazy Hard Steps. So basically, we're talking about this same exact issue of what to do when people have done atrocious things. How do we deal with that? And we're going to look at it through the lens of politics and government in the form of Cambodian Rock Band. And in my opinion, Donald Trump is a Pol Pot on the rise. If you don't know who Pol Pot is, he is the communist dictator that murdered 3 million Cambodians in the late 1970s. And in my opinion, the Donald Trump regime is gearing up to be and do the exact same thing. We have a authoritarian dictator in our midst, and we need to hold him responsible. And that's part of why I'm so angry today and why I'm talking about personal responsibility, because each one of us has a role to play. And I'm going to talk about how the play Cambodian Rock Band did a beautiful job of illustrating through art how every person within the most toxic system has a role to play, has responsibility to take. Then we're going to talk about it in terms of our criminal justice system. That's Van Jones and the Redemption Project, and how important that is. And that touches on issues of racial inequality and injustice that exists here in this country. And then we're going to talk about it in terms of men behaving badly with women and sexually inappropriate contact at work, which is the topic of my podcast. And in every case, we need to stay mindful of the formula, which is that personal responsibility is what's most important. Each one of us is required to take personal responsibility for the role that we are playing. Regardless of whether you're Pol Pot or Donald Trump, the torturous dictator at the top, or if you are the unjustly imprisoned, poverty-stricken, undocumented immigrant victim of sexual abuse at the very bottom. Everybody has a role in taking responsibility. It's not the same thing as being assigned blame. Important distinction. So taking personal responsibility, the critical role of truth, the critical role of contrition, and the critical role of forgiveness. These are what we want to be talking about today. So let's talk about Cambodian Rock Band, this amazing play. In short, what the play illustrates for us is that we have, I'll say, 4 primary characters in terms of being shown individuals who could be held to blame for atrocious things. In the play, we are introduced to Pol Pot, the communist dictator at the very top of the Khmer Rouge, the terrorist organization. I don't even know if it's accurate to call it terrorist organization. The murderous dictator, how about that, who oversaw the killing of as many as 3 million Cambodians in the late 70s. So we have Pol Pot at the very top. Then the play introduces us to a man by the name of Doik. And Doik is a character who I knew nothing about before watching this play, but he is a character who, in the 1970s, he ran a prison camp. We could compare it to Auschwitz during the Holocaust. We could compare it to the detention camps that are now forming on the United States southern border, where immigrants are being illegally detained and whose civil and human rights are being violated by the government of the United States. So this guy Doik, in the play Cambodian Rock Band, this guy Doik ran this prison camp, and Doik oversaw. He was given by Pol Pot was number 1. Doik is now number 2 as far as the people in the play who we are being asked to blame. And Doik was given 20,000 people to his prison. Doik ensured that all but 7 of them were murdered. Horrendous, murderous guy, right? In the play, we are introduced to the idea that Doik certainly believed himself to not have responsibility for what he did. I was just following orders. We heard a lot of that in the Nazi tribunals, didn't we? I was just following orders. It's not my fault. I have no responsibility in this. This is a toxic, broken, corrupt system, murderous dictators, but it's not my fault. Just because here he is, Doik, the guy that killed 20,000 people, was ultimately in prison and so on and so forth. He said, I don't have responsibility. If I hadn't killed those people, all he would have done is kill me and put somebody else in my place. I don't have any responsibility. So then coming down the line in the play, Cambodian Rock Band, which you need to go check out. First, we've got Pol Pot. Then we've got Doik. Third person that we are asked to examine in terms of their role with blame is a young Cambodian guy who was recruited as a prison guard. And this prison guard was given a gun and was instructed to actually carry out the murders of the people in the prison camp. This guy, Doik, this number 2 guy, according to the play, and I have not reviewed any of the underlying first resource materials about this case, so I'm relying upon what the play taught me yesterday, 2 nights ago. But this prison guard guy, he was the one that was responsible for doing the torture and committing the murders. But he earlier in the play was presented to us as one of our heroes, one of the characters who we liked and who we were a fan of. And we were brought to feel like he was a good guy. But now here he's been recruited as a prison guard, and he's the one who's actually enacting the torture. Is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? Is he responsible or is he a victim? And we're also asked to think about his choices, his personal responsibility. And then lastly, we have sort of the main character, at least as far as who potentially has blame. And it is the prisoner, this man who has been unjustly imprisoned, accused of being a spy. And he is now set to be tortured to death. And he's presented to us as just a victim. He has no responsibility, no blame. He's just a victim. And yet, as now we're going to go back up the chain and take a look at the personal responsibility that we could, that each one of these characters could have taken, and in varying degrees within the play did. And these are total spoilers, so if you're going to go watch the play, fast forward for a bit here because I'm totally going to ruin the plot right now. So the prisoner, the one who has been presented to us as an innocent victim, as somebody without blame, who just shit happened to him, totally without blame. What we find out is that the only reason, not only was he in this prison, but he had 7 brothers and sisters and a mother and a father, all of whom got killed. And what we're told within the context of the play is that his entire family had plane tickets to escape Cambodia. But he, this main character who becomes a prisoner, asked his family to wait for a week before they made their escape because he wanted to record an album with his friends. He was a musician, Cambodian Rock Band. He wanted to record an album. It was really super important to him. They had studio time. They wanted to get it done. They had it scheduled. So he asked his family to wait for a week. And in that week, the Khmer Rouge shut down all the airports, made their escape impossible, and set in motion all of their deaths. So he certainly, and the prisoner, this man, he ultimately does survive. Again, total spoilers. You don't want to keep watching this if you want to watch the play, but he spends the rest of his life feeling responsible. And sure, there's an extent to which he is responsible. I mean, he didn't know. It's not like he didn't pull the trigger. He didn't commit the murders, but he took actions that resulted in his family dying. Next, we go up to the prison guard, the one who we're introduced to in the play that hey Joe, nice to see you. Thanks. I'm glad that you like this. And yeah, stay tuned, please. Next up the chain of command within the play, Cambodian Rock Band, is the prison guard. And the prison guard and the prisoner at the beginning of the play were friends. They were actually bandmates. They were bandmates in this recording that the prisoner made his whole family stay in Cambodia a week later to finish. And so they all got trapped in Cambodia. And by the way, the night that they were recording the album, the prisoner tried to get his friend to run away and tried to convince him that running away, fleeing the country was the right thing to do. And the prisoner was ready to do it. He would have left the very next day. His friend, the guy that ended up being the prison guard, wasn't convinced. He thought, you know what? And so we're asked in this way, personal responsibility versus blame. This guy is a prison guard. He's forced to do these killings and this torture by the Khmer Rouge. But by the same token, earlier, he made the choice. He said, you know what? We've been being treated pretty badly here in Cambodia up until now. The Vietnamese, the Americans, they're not so great. How much worse can the Khmer Rouge be? I'm going to be on the side of whoever it is that's in charge. And in my opinion, there's an awful lot of people who in this country at this moment in time are supporting Donald Trump for the similar reason. There are lots of people in this country today who support Donald Trump because they think he is better than any other politician. They believe his lies. They think that he is acting in our best interests. They refuse to see the truth of his authoritarian, murderous, torturous, corrupt, criminal reality. And they're like, I'm going to go along with this guy, Donald Trump. Those people, in my opinion, are complicit in the crimes and the atrocities that are still yet on their way in this country, because this authoritarian dictator Trump is not going to stop until he's forced to be stopped, just like Pol Pot in Cambodia. So this prison guard, so he's presented as sort of a, kind of like a Nazi SS soldier. So many of these men who in the tribunal, in the trials of Nazi soldiers, they said, I was just following orders. And they thought that it was so unfair that they were being held to account for just doing what their superiors told them. But conveniently, they're overlooking the fact, why were you even in that army in the first place? Why didn't you stand up 3 years ago and speak out against these atrocities? That's where your responsibility lies. Your responsibility lies, whether I'm talking to an SS soldier or I'm talking to somebody who got indoctrinated into the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, or I'm talking to Trump supporters. Your responsibility is to wake the fuck up. Your responsibility is to see the truth of what is happening around you and accept the terrifying reality that is on its way. And to speak out and to call it out and to say things that are uncomfortable and to hold people accountable, to force people to look at the truth, to not play nice, to not let your friends off the hook. That is your responsibility in this country today. Just like it was those Nazi soldiers' responsibility in the 1930s in Germany, and it was those Cambodian soldiers' responsibility when the Khmer Rouge was coming up in Cambodia in the 1970s. People, these dictators, Pol Pot, Adolf Hitler, Donald Trump, don't come to power magically. Dictators only survive to the extent that they are able to brainwash people in the country that they are getting ready to overrun. And the individual people have a responsibility to recognize what is being done to them and have the courage to stand up. And anybody who is supporting Donald Trump in this country today is shirking your responsibility to do that. I get it that it's terrifying to think about our airports being shut down, to think about military control being exerted on this country, to think about our elections being canceled. It's terrifying. And we cannot just wait for the Mueller report or expect that our elected leaders are going to impeach him. No, we cannot shirk the responsibility to somebody else. Every single one of us individuals living in this country has a responsibility to use our voice, to make our opinions known, to let everybody else know that we see it and we will not tolerate it. And if you are not doing that, you are complicit. Moving on to the Van Jones Redemption Project. Because with all this fury and hostility that I have towards individuals who bury their heads in the sand and refuse to see the truth of what's going on around them, I must maintain an open window for forgiveness. Now, that does not mean that I'm just going to start being nice to you and start being polite to you, while you spew your false propaganda in support of this president. No, that's not forgiveness. That's putting my head under the sand. That's shirking my responsibility to call out the atrocities around me. No, what I mean is once you, the soon-to-be former Trump supporter, starts recognizing, once you open the Mueller report for yourself and you're like, fuck, he's not exonerated. That's a lie. The Mueller report says that not only is he guilty of all kinds of shit, the reason that they weren't able to actually indict more people is just because all of their witnesses lied. So if you open your eyes, open the Mueller report, acknowledge the truth, and you say to yourself, oh my God, I didn't know. I am so sorry. How can I help to fix this shit show now? We've now, in that scenario, we now have truth that you, the former Trump supporter, the former brainwashed citizen who was helping to prop up the dictator, the former Trump supporter, you've now seen the truth. We now have facts and truth to come from. That's one ingredient in personal responsibility. Number two, contrition. Not only do you see the facts, you get it that you fucked up. You did something really bad. You voted for this guy. You voted for other Republicans. You kept your head in the sand. You promoted their false propaganda on Facebook. And you get it that that was really wrong of you. Contrition on your part. Now I get to find a way to forgive you. Now I get to not punish you, not continue whipping you, but to actually forgive you. And that's hard. And the Van Jones Redemption Project, I haven't watched it yet, I'll confess. I just heard him talking about it last night on Bill Maher's show. And I checked it out real quick, and I think that it has not yet actually been aired, although I could be wrong about that. There could be a couple episodes out, and I just haven't seen them yet. But from what he just described about it, what it says about it online, what Van Jones is doing is he's showing us real people, incarcerated people, who have done shitty things. They're incarcerated, and they're sorry. And what Van Jones is doing on this show is bringing these shitty people, incarcerated people who have done shitty things. They're not shitty people. They're ordinary people who have done shitty things. And he is creating a situation in which they can have conversation with the people whose lives have been affected by the shitty things that they did. Now, I don't know the exact details of who he's talking to, but as an example, what he's doing is he's taking somebody who murdered someone and is fostering some sort of a conversation with that convicted murderer and the family members, the surviving family members of that murderer, for the purpose of activating this cycle of contrition and forgiveness. Contrition and forgiveness. We have to be able to get to a place where we, the ones who have been wronged, the surviving family members, the Democrats and liberals who see Trump for what he is, we have to be able to get to a place where we are able to forgive. We have to be willing to say, no matter what you did, if you are sorry, and if you are genuinely wanting to do better and be better going forward, then I'm going to help you do that. And it starts by me offering you my forgiveness, treating you like a human being, opening my heart to you, trusting you. That's what forgiveness is. And it's powerful. So that brings me in conclusion to the third example I wanted to use to illustrate this point, which is the podcast project that I'm working on called Solving Me Too in 7 Simple Steps. Simple but crazy hard steps. Because it's a fact that there are a lot of men in this country, the United States, that have been doing shitty things to women for a long time. And in my podcast, I'm focusing on the workplace sexual assault and sexual harassment, with a little bit of a nod towards gender-based discrimination and pay inequities, because it's rather difficult to. It's all a spectrum, right? It's all a spectrum. And it's very difficult to say, where does discrimination and harassment begin? Sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination. And what has happened so far in this country with this movement, the Me Too movement, is that we have done a lot of lashing out. We have done a lot of catching the bad actors, naming the men who have been doing some of the most atrocious things, and we're holding them to account. We're punishing them. We're stripping them of their jobs. We're publicly shaming and humiliating them. And there's a role for that. There is certainly a role for people who have done atrocious things to be held accountable. However, we cannot just slash and punish and humiliate our way to a solution. That's not going to work. We can lock up thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of men who have in fact committed sexual harassment and sexual assault. We can fire them all. We can lock them all up. We can prevent them from ever getting another job. That doesn't solve the problem, because there is still a toxic system. And all that will happen is that new ones will grow up in their place. That's all that will happen. Instead, we have to address the system. And addressing the system starts with acknowledging that every single one of us plays a role. Every single one of us has responsibility. Every single one of us has a voice. And just like, as I was talking about with the example of Cambodian Rock Band, where Pol Pot has responsibility, and also the prisoner, all the way at the bottom, has responsibility. Exactly the same way, in any workplace situation where there is sexual harassment and sexual assault going on, there is responsibility that should be taken by the man committing the sexual harassment and sexual assault. There should be responsibility taken by the board of directors or the HR department who some kind of way allowed it to happen. There is responsibility to be taken by the men who have heard this guy talking about what he does and either laughed or didn't say anything or didn't report him or whatever it was, in some kind of way enabled him. There's responsibility to be taken for the women who have done the exact same thing, who have witnessed or heard about sexual harassment and sexual assault happening and who kept their mouths shut and who didn't say anything, who, when asked, downplayed what he had done. They have responsibility to take. And it's not to assign. It's not on us to blame them. It's on them to take responsibility for what they have done. There's also a role for the people who feel victimized by this behavior to take responsibility. And that's a really hard one. And it's really activating. And I was having a conversation the other night with a man about this who agrees with my philosophy of holding all these bad actors accountable and keeping safe all of the women and other people who have been targeted and harassed and harmed, right? And yet, when he chose just the slightly wrong words that made it sound like he was saying that it was some woman's fault that she got harassed or assaulted, or that she was to blame, or that it was her responsibility to fix her own situation going forward, I got mad at him. So I get it that whatever words I choose to walk this very fine line are words that could easily make you get angry at me and make you feel outraged at me for victim blaming, victim shaming, saying that it's the woman's fault. So all I can do is try to be as sensitive with my word choice as I can. Because what's essential is that even a victimized person looks for a way that he or she can take responsibility for their situation. Not to blame themselves, not to say that it's their fault, not anybody else's fault, but because that's empowering. When you take responsibility for what's going on, that means that you have taken one baby step towards changing your situation. So now let me back up and make sure to reiterate that the blame belongs to whoever it is that is inflicting the harm, okay? The blame belongs to whoever is inflicting the harm. If person B over there wasn't whipping out his dick at inappropriate times, nobody would be getting inappropriately exposed to his dick, right? It's his responsibility to keep his own penis in his own pants. And anytime he does not do that, and somebody is exposed to his penis in a way they didn't want to be, it's his fault. He gets the blame for that. He gets punished for that. And it is empowering if the person who has been unwillingly forced to experience his penis can find a way to take some measure of responsibility for what has just happened to her. In some cases, him. Sexual assault certainly does happen to men as well. It's empowering. And it's a very fine line to walk. But it's so important to hold the bad actors responsible 100%, remain clear-eyed that they are the ones who have done bad and harmful things, and it is their fault. They are to blame. And it's empowering if we can recognize, like the story from the beginning of this video, Cambodian Rock Band, if the prisoner can acknowledge within himself that if only he hadn't wanted to record this album, he wouldn't be in this situation. It doesn't mean it's his fault, and it certainly doesn't mean that the prison guard torturing him, or the prison supervisor ordering the torture, or Pol Pot orchestrating the entire thing aren't also responsible. And it does not mean that they don't need to be punished. But now, let's talk about the role of forgiveness. When we've got somebody who has done bad things, and let's just say for the moment that this person acknowledges, yes, I took out my penis on many occasions and exposed it to many people who wanted nothing to do with my penis. Whatever it was, I made them look at it. I made them touch it. I penetrated them with it. Whatever, right? Whatever he did that was inappropriate with his penis. I did it, and I'm sorry that I did it. Because I said a moment ago, right, that no matter how much responsibility the person on the receiving end of that unwelcome penis attention, no matter how much responsibility that person takes, the penis owner still deserves the blame and the punishment and the responsibility. Yes, and what's the role for forgiveness? What's the role for forgiveness? What if, and what if not only does he acknowledge what he did, which is the truth, that's one ingredient in the formula that I was talking about, right? He says, this is what happened. He gives the truth. And he says, I'm really, really sorry. What I did was shitty. I'm so sorry. It's contrition. That's two. That's the second ingredient in the formula. But let's even take it a level beyond that and say that he starts talking about the ways in which he himself maybe was harmed earlier in life, that damaged him and twisted him and gave him a completely false set of beliefs that have led to these very abusive actions. Now, all of a sudden, just like in Cambodian Rock Band, the story that I used at the beginning, we thought we were talking to the prison master, the one who was responsible for killing all 20,000 people. But now, all of a sudden, we see that he is also the prisoner, every bit as much the victim of his own circumstances, deserving of our forgiveness. And the interesting twist with Cambodian Rock Band is that prisoner, who throughout the play, we are being asked to believe that he's blameless. He's an innocent victim. Yeah, it's true. He wanted to record an album, and that caused him to not flee the country. And that act made him susceptible to getting captured and getting all of his family killed. But my God, that's a really, that's a small action, right? We think to ourselves. So we're being asked to believe throughout the play that he is a completely innocent victim. But then in a twist, at the end, the reason he didn't die, the reason he escaped, is because his guard was that friend of his from from earlier in the play, earlier in history. And so the guy that was responsible for guarding him was a friend of his. And he manipulated the fact of that friendship to give him the opening to murder his friend so that he could escape. So now even the innocent victim is as guilty of murder as everybody else that we've been introduced to, all up and down the chain. So it's complicated. When we're talking about toxic, broken, corrupt systems, it's very difficult to view blame and responsibility in black and white terms. What's most true is that every single one of us bears some blame for helping to create, maintain, foster this toxic system that we all exist within. And just like every one of us has some responsibility for creating it, every one of us must strive to be truthful with ourselves, with other people, about our role, about what we've done, about what we've experienced, the good and the bad. Every one of us must strive to take personal responsibility. However much energy we're putting into blaming other people, and I did a lot of it earlier in this video, yelling at Trump supporters, right? Saying, you people are complicit. It's my responsibility to take at least 10% as much energy and examine how I'm contributing to it too. What am I doing that's contributing? Every one of us has a responsibility to be contrite. Once you've acknowledged the truth of your responsibility, can you be sorry? Can you be regretful? And then the final piece is forgiveness, starting with forgiveness of yourself. Can you forgive yourself? Most of all. And then, of course, going down the chain, can you forgive others? Thanks for watching this video today. Thanks for listening to my rant. I hope it's been thought-provoking. I sure hope that you check out Cambodian Rock Band. Fantastic play. You should also check out The Redemption Project with Van Jones. It's going to be on CNN, an 8-part series. And I hope you check out my podcast, which we don't yet have an actual launch date. Sooner, hopefully, maybe the fall. We'll see. But subscribe to me here. Or come visit my website, juliaklein.com, and get subscribed there. And I promise you'll get notifications when my podcast is launched. And leave me a comment that lets me know what you think about this complex intersection between personal responsibility, truth, contrition, and forgiveness. Which is the one that you struggle with the most? Which is the one that which one do you find easiest? I'm curious. What are your thoughts on this? So, thanks. It's been great spending a little bit of Saturday afternoon with you. Bye.